This is the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World, West Alabama. How we doing today on this Thursday? Hanging out with us on the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. You're watching us on the BamaCentral YouTube channel. You're checking us out on your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Amazon. We appreciate everybody who has subscribed, rated, and reviewed the show. Send it to a friend. Tell them about the show. Say, look at what this bozo is having to say today. But we are here getting you closer and closer to homecoming. I hope you guys are ready for homecoming here in Tuscaloosa, and hopefully it will be a good homecoming. I know it will only be good if Alabama wins. And so we will talk about Alabama and Missouri. The line is creeping up. I think Alabama is now a 14, 15-point favorite. Gamble at your own risk. And we'll talk about really the ins and outs and the whys of why that line is moving out. But today we are thankful to be joined by Joey Van Zummeren of BamaCentral, Missouri on SI. He is the site lead for Missouri on SI. You've heard him on the show many times. That's okay, Mason. He's working on he's giving me a sign in the back end saying he's not quite ready. But you've listened to Joey Van Zummeren many times on the show. You follow him on Twitter at JoeyVZ_. He's helped us with Missouri a lot. He a superstar and really grateful for his time today. Joey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Obviously, really excited for this matchup, and the energy in Columbia, I would say, is the greatest it's been for this football team this season because they've yet to have a really strong win past their two sacrificial lambs in Murray State and Buffalo. They beat Boston College, to beat Vanderbilt, but both those are kind of ugly wins, and so to have a win against Auburn, it wasn't a 4-quarter game because quarterback Brady Cook was only in it for a few drives, but a really one that they can build some momentum off of. So energy is great here in Columbia. Weather is great in Columbia, and looking forward to this weekend.
All right, 6-1, and that's exactly where we should start with Brady Cook. I want to hear your perspective on Brady Cook from last week, and I want you to take us through the whole saga. Any details that we're not getting from the general Twitter bots. Before we get to the saga, though, I skipped a step. I do need to tell everybody that we are sponsored by the Derek Daniel State Farm right there in Tuscaloosa. You can call Derek Daniel today at 205-758-3391 for all of your insurance needs, home life and auto insurance needs. He can be found right off of McFarland Boulevard, and we want you to call Derek Daniel and see how much money he can save you today. Now, I just lost Joey. I just lost Mason in the back end. Oh, there he is. Okay, perfect. All right, we're back on it. What I want to do is hear about the warrior that is Brady Cook. Brady Cook last week beat Auburn, so you should all be a big fan. Jamarian Latham, when he heard the story, the Alabama defensive lineman, when he heard the story, he said, "That's a dog. That's a dude right there." I like So what's he talking about, Joey? What was the story? What was it like at Faroe Field, watching kind of Drew Pine struggle and then seeing Brady Cook come in to save the day?
Gosh, yeah, just a whirlwind of a few hours there. And the reporting on it was weird because we were getting stuff from the TV broadcast, obviously, and then also from Pete Thamel on Twitter, and then also from the SID right behind me. And so when Brady first went out, it was odd because you could tell pretty quickly that not that it was something serious, but that they knew that it wasn't just, a bruising or whatever, because usually they at least take him to the medical tent. I believe Brady, he gets dragged down on a play. He stays in for 3 or 4 more. And then it looks like, at first my fear was that it was non-contact because I didn't even realize that he got up limping after that sack he took a few plays ago. So I was really worried for Brady Cook if it was a non-contact injury, but they immediately take him into the locker room. And then it kind of just goes silent for a while on the word on him. The first thing we got was Pete Thamel saying, well, it was actually the broadcast sideline reporter who said that they are expecting him to return to the game, that they were just taping his ankle up in the locker room. And then as time wore on, it's like, man, either they're working with some really tough tape to unravel, like when you got like a aluminum foil at home and like you just can't get it unraveled, like maybe that's the deal or what's going on. And then around halftime, Pete Thamel reports they're going to find out more at halftime. They're still evaluating him. Turns out at that time he was at the hospital just across the street, MU Healthcare, being evaluated for that, having an MRI. And so to return to the game was pretty incredible. And I think as far as the one detail that people on the outside wouldn't realize, and I think could play a factor into his status for this upcoming week, in his post-game press conference, Brady Cook is usually he has energy at the right times, but a kind of like even keel guy. This man was, I'll just say you could tell, I'm not going to assume, but I think he had a good amount of painkillers to be in there and return to this game. So we'll see. I mean, the thing about Brady Cook that Eli Drinkwitz has gone about for many times, Eli Drinkwitz has been the number one cheerleader, seems too negative, but he's always gone to defend Brady Cook. And he's always talked about his toughness, and I don't think that should ever be questioned. 2022, he suffers an arm injury. I believe it's a shoulder injury against Kansas State when they get absolutely clobbered in that game. And then he plays through the whole season. And unfortunately, that affected a lot of people's perception of him going into 2023 because it wasn't learned until after the season, I believe, that he was playing the whole year with an injury on his throwing arm. Then against Kansas State in 2023, he suffers a lower body injury. I want to say it was ankle again. And that seemed to be at least a few weeks ordeal. I believe it was after the Memphis game in week 4 that Eli Drinkwitz said on Tuesday of that week going into that Memphis game. So 3 days after the Kansas State game, like Brady was walking on crutches around the facility, and then he goes out there and plays against Memphis. He's shown time and time again how much he wants to play. So as I tweeted the other day, if he doesn't end up playing against Alabama, I mean, I'll be pretty surprised, honestly. I don't know anything about his like the severity of the injury or anything, but just knowing who he is, I think he's going to be out there.
Brady Cook's one of my favorite players in the SEC just because of just everything that he's, people always talk about the big brands. Oh, I always dreamed to go to Georgia. I always dreamed to go to Texas. I always dreamed to go to Ohio State, Alabama. To hear a kid consistently, it's not just, hey, I'm the starting quarterback and here's my throwaway line, but consistently, I grew up in Missouri. I love Chase Daniel. I wanted to be a Missouri Tiger quarterback forever and ever. And dude, you cannot question it because you go to the hospital and okay, the team is reeling. And let's be honest, that would have been a really bad loss to lose at home to Auburn. And Missouri's flirted with a couple of bad losses this year. But he says, no, whatever's going on with my ankle, just get me back out there. What I read, and you can correct me, was they said they looked at it, MRI said, no, you can't go. And then he said, look at it again. And they said, I don't know, maybe you can. And he said, okay, send me back there. I'm going. That's kind of what I read. Just incredible, just guts to lead them back and say, we're not taking this bad loss. We're going to keep our season alive. I'm just impressed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what you mentioned there of just how much he embraces this school. It's not only the fact that, he committed to Missouri during his sophomore year of high school. So, I mean, that speaks enough. And I think his whole story is pretty impressive. And even dating back to in high school, I think one of my favorite parts about his story is in high school, there was a rival team, or maybe it was just an opponent coming up that started like a hate campaign or cyberbullying seems too severe. It was talking trash about Brady Cook on social media before the game. And then he goes out there and lights it up. And, unfortunately for him, most of that hate has been inside the house with the Mizzou fan base. And,
why is that?
I think.
Give me a read on that because you look at the other big-time quarterbacks in the SEC, and most of their universities love them. Of course, Jalen's getting a little, Dale Milroe getting a little bit of a backlash the last couple of weeks. But like in large part, you're the starting quarterback for your university for a winning team. You're pretty much universally liked. Why are people just not on board with Brady?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the 2022 season permanently affected how a lot of people view his play. And I also think Eli Drinkwitz's staunch defense sometimes sets up Brady for hate within the fan base. Eli is always talking about, just this past week even talked about how people on Twitter talking about Brady Cook bothers Eli Drinkwitz, but it doesn't bother Brady Cook. And I think some of that leads to some people thinking that Eli Drinkwitz isn't holding Brady Cook accountable when Brady Cook underperforms. And it's hard this season to really evaluate Brady Cook's play because the offense as a whole has been pretty messy. The offensive line hasn't been great. And I think especially, just looking at the storyline again, that 2022 season where he's playing injured, 2023, after that Kansas State game, really consistent, has a few great games against Florida, against Vanderbilt. He's just lights out. And then this year where that, especially the deep ball has been the main thing where they were so successful on that last year. And then now they just haven't been able to connect on it. And the easy thing to do with those is, Brady Cook is throwing it 4 or 5 yards off. A lot of them have been overthrows. Like, he must have lost his touch, must have lost his accuracy, when in reality, some of that could be the offensive line not giving him enough time to really set his feet. Some of that could be the wide receivers not making good enough adjustments or really running their routes all the way through. So I definitely understand why with the, just on paper, you would look at this and say, okay, Brady Cook on his completions over 20 yards, that's been a stat brought up a lot of times. He is, I don't know the exact percentage off my top of my head, but it's such a steep fall off. And, so I think that's the main reason why just offense has been messy and he's been a part of it.
All right, we're hanging out with Joey Van Zummeren of Missouri on SI. You're following him at JoeyVZ_. Just a quick update. Mason just had a little technical issues, not going to be joining us today. Not ditching you guys, the listener, just couldn't make it happen with technology. Sometimes those ghosts in the computer get you, and that's okay. We'll catch up with Mason tomorrow. It's no big deal. Joey, I want to keep going with what you just kind of ended with, because each Thursday on BamaCentral.com, I have basically taken the cover and I have taken this element of Alabama's opponent will be a problem. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, it was South Carolina's defensive line. 3 weeks ago, it was Diego Pavia's running game. Last week, it was Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. Well, I go into this week thinking, all right, I'm writing about Missouri getting down the field, vertical shots, Luther Burton, Theo Weiss. Those two guys are bad mother bleepers, and Alabama's secondary is a little bit suspect. So I'm thinking I'm about to pull up all these games, and I'm about to have deep shot after deep shot after deep shot just to compile to say, watch out, Alabama fans, this might be a problem. In my work this week, I've seen they're missing a lot of them. They're missing a lot of them. But they're using – it seems like they've adjusted through these 7 weeks to, okay, we're not hitting the deep shots as much. Well, let's just get Luther involved any way we can underneath. And basically it seems like they have adjusted to their inability to hit the deep shots and said, okay, we just got to get the ball out quick, and we got to get the ball in Luther Burton's hands. Is that's what's going on? Will there be maybe deep shots taken on Saturday? What do you see is the problem in the passing game, maybe beyond Brady Cook and just the protection? Is it maybe a disconnection with the wide receivers? I can't quite diagnose it.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned about the deep passes and adjusting to that and kind of letting go of that has been interesting, because ahead of the Vanderbilt game, I believe it was, Brady Cook had talked about those struggles. And I mean, he kind of attributed to what you just mentioned of that, the lack of the right timing with the wide receivers, which is weird because it's the same exact wide receiving group as last year with, if anything, they just have two sophomores who have been getting more involved, just new faces. But other than that, the top five are the exact same as last year, the exact same that Brady Cook was able to connect with so many deep shots on. So it's confusing. And ahead of that Vanderbilt game, like I said, the struggles for the explosive pass from Mizzou was evident even in the weeks before. And so they were going to throw themselves out of it basically and just keep on trying to hit it, because they were holding on to that faith that it was going to eventually be as successful as last year.
You only need to hit a couple.
Yeah. And so Brady, he talked about offense coordinator Kirby Moore is going to give us more opportunities for the deep ball on first and second down. And that was the case against Vanderbilt. Still weren't connecting on them. And then you turn the page to now, I definitely think they've accepted, okay, for whatever reason, it's not working. And I think sometimes as a coach, you just have to let go of that, let go of things that you really want to be a part of your identity. I mean, this is when Kirby Moore was hired as offense coordinator here 2 years ago. He comes from the Jeff Tedford coaching tree. He's going to bring this explosive, deep offense, going to really open it up because in 2022, that was not existent for the Mizzou offense. But they have unlike in 2022, they have the players to be able to be successful otherwise. Luther Burden, all of his, great plays last year, and what makes him so special is just those passes where he catches it 8-10 yards past the line of scrimmage and then just goes to work with one-on-one matchups with defenders out on the field. I mean, I think of the game against LSU last year. We has a catch early on in the game on a third down. He catches it right past the first down line, and then he jukes out one LSU defender, and then from there, he just is so good at finding open space. And oddly enough, though, what you said about like just finding ways to get him the ball, it hasn't been the case really. And
Okay.
So I mean, against UMass, their last non-conference game of the year, they got him the ball on the second play on a jet sweep, and he takes it 61 yards to the house. He has a few more good catches, and then he exits that game in the third quarter with an injury. And then against Auburn, he didn't get a single touch until 3 minutes in the second quarter remained. And so it was weird to see when Drew Pine goes out there, like, okay, you have a guy that you don't need to hit 20 yards down the field for him to be able to make a play out of it. Like, just even on a wide receiver screen, it would seem, just get him the ball,
right,
let him go to work. And even with some of the other guys on Mizzou's team that are dangerous after the catch too, hasn't been the case. Eli Drinkwitz has kind of shot the idea of that down, of just force feeding it to Luther, get him the ball. He's, we have a deep wide receiving core, and we're going to spread the ball out. But when you pose the question of what does this Mizzou offense, what's the biggest threat they pose to Alabama or any opponent, I couldn't tell you right now. And that's not to say they haven't had like things that work. Like the run game has been good in a lot of games. Nate Noel has been really good, but doesn't seem like he's going to be available. They, as Drinkwitz has said a lot, they haven't been able to find rhythm. He even said yesterday, the run game has been good, but we haven't been able to be successful at it when we need it to be. So, they're dealing with injuries right now, and it's still, I'm still not sure on how to read this offense, even 7 games into the season now, because, the game against Vanderbilt, when they go into double overtime with them, that was a surprise, and they looked good in the first half, and then the second half, just everything kind of fell apart, and that's what forces the game to go into double overtime. Against Texas A&M, obviously they look terrible in that game, but I think it's hard to judge a team when they're down 3 possessions by the end of the first quarter, and of course that's by their own doing, but they're so out of their
snowball
system,
just rolled.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then they play UMass, and then they have this game against Auburn where their starting quarterback only plays a little over a half the snaps. So we'll see what they bring out here against Alabama. I think the key to it is, like you said, getting Luther Burden the ball. This is exactly the game you recruited him for, exactly the type of game you need him for.
When you look at one of my biggest complaints with the Alabama defense this season, you've got a lot of people complaining about run gap fits, and that's absolutely a valid complaint. But an even more fundamental complaint to me is tackling. The guys on the Alabama defense have done a real good job swiping at the football, raking at the football, grabbing and trying to force the strip, but they're giving up just consistently, not as much maybe against South Carolina, but consistently yards after contact, yards after the catch. Because you look at Dylan Bell in the Georgia game in the second half has the big touchdown catch. Well, I think 3 defenders might have had a chance to take him down after the catch. That's my biggest. If I'm Missouri right now, I'm just looking at those DBs and I'm saying, okay, if we can get the Owies, if we can get Mookie Cooper, he broke like 5 Auburn tackles on that 78-yard. It wasn't a touchdown, but you got him down to the goal line on a 78-yard catch because he busted 2 or 3 Auburn defenders in the secondary. Like, that's my big concern. Missouri, if they're going to make plays in the passing game, if you're going to make completions, okay, not a problem. You just got to make the tackle. You got to secure the tackle and don't let an 8-yard reception turn to 16 or an 8-yard reception turn to 78.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's going to be interesting to just see how Missouri offensively attacks to this, because if they have Nate Noel in the game, I think they try to. I mean, Eli Drinkwitz mentioned what Vanderbilt did so well against Alabama was just playing keep away from the Alabama offense. Yep. And so if they have Nate Noel in this game, that makes it a lot easier. But they don't have Nate Noel. I think Marcus Carroll is really good, so we'll see if that still ends up being the plan. But I don't think Mizzou can keep up. If they make this a shootout against Alabama, I don't think they can keep up with Alabama offense.
I think so as well. Alabama's offense has its own problems also, but maybe this will be the remedy. I want to go to, before we get to the defense, I got one more question on the offense. Let's talk about Drew Pine. Mm-hmm. Drew Pine transfers from Notre Dame, from Arizona State, now at Missouri. Mm-hmm. If he has to go on Saturday, does that change the game plan much? Obviously, it's a drop-off. It's not Brady Cook. But will the style, will the play calling, will that change a whole lot, or will it still be kind of the same Missouri Tigers, Eli Drinkwitz offense is what we're running?
Yeah, it's really difficult to evaluate Pine from this last game. And I know this was a lot of fans' first introduction to them. And they're going, who the heck is this guy? And he had some bad passes that were, just straight up inaccurate. But I don't think you can evaluate him off of that tape at all. He's thrown into the game, and sure, you're supposed to be prepared for it, and maybe he was mentally. But when you're not getting first team reps with these guys consistently, when this was his first SEC action, and Notre Dame isn't playing anybody easy, and he got a good amount of starts there. But when it was your first SEC action, he was just so clearly not ready for the pace of the game, held on to the ball for way too long. I think the reason they brought him in as a transfer was because of his intelligence, because of his veteran experience. So, obviously, if they end up having to go with him, though, I do think the game plan changed. He's definitely not as fast as Brady Cook, although I don't think even if Brady Cook does go in this game, he's going to be all that mobile because of that ankle injury. But with Drew Pine in there, he's not as mobile, probably not as creative. But he can still read a defense. Obviously, Alabama is going to be a tougher one than he's probably had experience with. But as far as if it changes the game plan, big time for Missouri. Probably not as many, probably not forcing the deep shot as much, trying to find it. And, I think no matter what, just get Luther the ball.
Alabama's playing Missouri at 2:30 on Saturday. We're hanging out with Joey Van Zummeren of Missouri on SI. You can follow him at Joey VZ_. Excuse me. Let's flip to the other side of the ball, because Alabama has really been in a kind of a weird 2-week stretch offensively, struggling against South Carolina and struggling against Tennessee, looking to find some openings. Well, I look up Missouri, number 7 in the nation in total defense, so it's not going to get any easier. Corey Batoon, coming from South Alabama, right there working under Kane Womack. Kind of a two-part question. What makes this defense so strong? And secondly, do you think that the relationship between Womack and Batoon will give Alabama any sort of advantage to kind of know what to expect and maybe game them into some positive plays?
Yeah, on the first one on what makes this defense successful, I would just say the depth, honestly. Like, they just have, like Eli Drinkwitz said a few weeks ago, they have 15, 16, maybe even 17 guys that are all starters basically, and they can rotate them so often. And I think that not only, the obvious benefit of that is the fact that, you can keep guys fresh, but also from play to play, they really can just play the personnel best for the situation. They can go so specific, especially on the defensive line. Their defensive line rotation is 6 deep at this point, and there's really no drop off. I mean, there is between guy number 1 and guy number 6, but they really can specialize how they use them. As specific to okay, a third down obvious pass situation. Okay, we're going to throw B and C in there. Okay, third down obvious run, we're going to throw A and D, and really switch that up. I think it's been interesting because the pass rush hasn't quite been there until this Auburn game, and then they only got 11 pressures, but the sacks and pressures they recorded really came at the best moments for them. And as far as the secondary, they've been trying a few different things there. They've had some trouble allowing some explosive plays, which I'm sure Ryan Williams is excited for. And then 4 of their safeties are listed on the availability report. All of them are questionable. I'd suspect them to play. And then at cornerback, they have they've been rotating Nick DeLoach and then Toriano Pride, who's a Clemson transfer at one boundary corner, and then Drayden Norwood, who has really been holding things down on his side of things. I also think in the middle of the field, they have star Dalen Carnell, who has been as good as ever, having his best year in his final year, had a great hit against Auburn last week. And then also Corey Flagg, the inside linebacker transfer from Miami, has probably been their best transfer defensively. Just all over the field, came as advertised for what he adds to this Mizzou defense. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to make sure the sound was clean. I want you to elaborate on Johnny Walker Jr. just a little bit, because right tackle Elijah Pritchett, good in some spots, bad in others. Same thing, really. I mean, Caden Proctor's been pretty good on the left side, really, since he's come back and stabilized the line. But still, I think that they're both still really young and susceptible to be taken advantage of. What's Johnny Walker going to be trying to bring to the table, getting after Jalen Milroe?
Yeah, I mean, first, with the edge group as a whole, kind of just like what I was mentioning with defensive line, of just the depth they have there. They have 4 guys that they can consistently rotate. Zion Young is definitely a guy to watch for both those tackles too. He had a sack against Auburn, deep in Auburn territory, and he read this RPO so great. Really great instincts, really quick mentally. With Johnny Walker, I think he can chase you down, and especially with Jalen Milroe's running ability, he can chase you down. He's not, I wouldn't say, I haven't watched him individually enough, but I wouldn't say he's a power rusher like Darius Robinson last year was from Mizzou. Really athletic, though. Really great with his hands. Had great pad level, he mentioned, against Auburn. So, yeah, I definitely think if you're circling a pass rusher to watch in this game from Mizzou, it's definitely Johnny Walker.
All right, let's finish things up with Joey Van Zummeren of Mizzou Central, Missouri on SI. We want to thank Derek Daniel for sponsoring the program today. You can call him today for all of your home, life, and auto insurance needs. Derek Daniel State Farm, just off of McFarland Boulevard. You can call him 205-758-3391. Call and see how much Derek can save you today. All right, Joey, you went on the road. Missouri went on the road a couple of weeks ago and got the doors blown off of them, 41-10 at Texas A&M. Okay, all right, just one game. You go on the road again the next week, 45-3 at UMass. Competition obviously much different. This will be the 3rd road trip for the Tigers. What have they learned from those 2 weeks that they can take into Bryant-Denny Stadium?
Well, look, down in Tuscaloosa, they're focusing. I saw an article this week that they're focusing on the little details, right? Like making sure your shirt is tucked in and stuff like that. I know they've had like some like ridiculous like discipline issues, and I know people have been focused on Kalen DeBoer's attire, and I know people were focused on Eli Drinkwitz wearing a bowl eligible T-shirt, but to that point, Mizzou is focusing on the little details as well, not if their shirt is tucked in or not. But looking,
are your guys showing up to meetings on time?
I couldn't tell you. I would think so.
That's what they said on Tuesday. We're tucking our shirts in and going to meetings on time. It's like, brother, this is the bare minimum.
Yeah, exactly. But looking back at that Texas A&M game, Eli said on reflecting on that they maybe in the game plan made it a little too complicated for their own players. And he said at the start of the year too, I had asked him something about just evolving the offense in the second year of offense coordinator Kirby Moore, and he kind of said, or no, I had asked him if there would be any effort to like conserve some of the playbook, don't put everything on the tape. And he basically said, I think it was a little bit of a cop out, but basically I think applies to this week too, of they're only going to run what their guys are comfortable with. And so they didn't do that against Texas A&M was his main takeaway. They don't run things that their guys were comfortable executing, didn't have enough confidence in running, didn't rep it enough. And so he said they're going to simplify it on both sides of the ball. He said against Texas A&M, or it was defense players that said after Texas A&M that each of them were trying to make a play too much instead of playing in the system. And like we were talking about, it snowballs so quickly. And I think that mentality can very easily take over when you're down a lot. Just everybody, saying, I don't care what the play call is. I'm going to try to get a sack on this play, or I'm going to try to score a touchdown on this play, instead of just playing within the system. And it can quickly fall apart when you don't have that going on. So as much as I'm sure they're still going to have some eye candy against Alabama, that's a big part of this offense. But sometimes it's just going to be, maybe it will be mean nothing. The illusion of complexity, as Sean McVay always likes to talk about, and they're going to run what their guys are confident with. So we'll see what that ends up looking like.
Joey, you've been covering Missouri all year long for Missouri on SI. Is there anything I've left off the table that you're thinking, this is what I'm thinking about for this week? This is my angle. This is my thought. This is what I'm worried about for Alabama, or what I want to see out of Missouri. I think I might have hit it all, but you've been covering the team. So anything else that you think Alabama fans need to know about the Missouri Tigers?
And it's so hard with the injuries. I would tell them about Brett Norfleet, what he can do as a receiver. He's a tight end, but he's questionable. He returned to this Auburn game. So yeah, difficult with injuries, but I guess I would just say just how much Mizzou, I wouldn't say needs this win. I mean, obviously their season and playoff hopes look a lot different if they don't end up coming out here with a win, but just how much it would skyrocket them, not only for their playoff chances, but just as a program overall, to really prove that people should take them seriously going forward. Obviously, they do really well in the SEC last season, but when they're two games against blue bloods, most well-respected programs, LSU and Georgia, they come up just short. They make crucial mistakes at the end. So if they can pull off a win here against Alabama on the road with an injured Brady Cook, it would be really impressive and really important for this team.
All right. Well, you're following Joey Van Zummeren at JoeyVZ_. You're following all of their great work at Missouri on SI. They're going to have some people in the Bryant-Denny Stadium press box. So if you want to read about everything that happens for the Missouri side, you can check out Missouri on SI, part of our Walsh Writing Network. Joey, have a great time, man. Enjoy the week.
Thank you. You as well, Joe.
Absolutely. That's Joey Van Zummeren joining us, and that's going to do it for our show today. We apologize for a little bit of the shortness just because some circumstances. Mason Woods missing out today just for some technical issues, and I was traveling. So we appreciate Joey Van Zummeren for joining us, Missouri on SI. We appreciate you guys for joining us, the listener, the viewer, on BamaCentral's YouTube channel, right here on my own social media machines at Joe Gaither 6, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. We want to thank Purple Turtle Roofing and Derek Daniel State Farm and Druid City Music Hall for sponsoring the Joe Gaither Show right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com.